Welcome in. It's your host, Blake Ruffino with AYS Sports. We're going to do this every single Tuesday. So I need you to do me a favor. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe. We are here from Service Hawk Digital Media. Attention, all service business owners. Are you ready to take your business to the next level? With Service Hawk Digital, you get the tools and experience to attract more customers and boost your online presence and dominate that local market. Service Hawk is your partner that truly understands the home services industry, helping businesses like yours grow. If you're serious about growth, guys, that's why we're here. I would not attach my name to it if I wasn't serious about growth and what we do in the digital space. Visit Service Hawk Digital today, servicehawk.io. That's servicehawk.io today, and soar above the competition. Look, I think there's three topics that you and I need to discuss today in this special, what do we want to call here? This special segment of AYS. Look, last night we talked about some specific things in reference to where LSU is as a program, where LSU is as a just overall football team. Where's the culture? You're 6-2 going into a bye week. Now you have Alabama that's going to be coming into town in 2 weeks. There are a couple things that I think that are very crucial that we got to discuss. Number one, this team has got to get back to understanding that when things start changing on the field, you got to be able to adapt. Let me explain. Last week against Texas A&M, you were in a situation where a new quarterback comes in, and because you didn't know or go through it during the week, you did not know what to do. And I think that when we look at this football team, I think there's one thing that is apparent. Unless you have gone through it the week, this team cannot, at least this defense cannot adjust on the fly. When you're getting in-game adjustments by Texas A&M or Ole Miss or whoever it is, it takes this team a little while to get things figured out. And that's got to get corrected during the bye week. You know, when Marcel Reed from A&M came in and you're unable to stop simple zone read principles, that's not completely all on the coaching staff. That is all completely on you too, not knowing your assignments, not knowing what it is that you needed to do. And then last week against A&M, you get overwhelmed. You're overthinking the situation. You're not playing fast. You're not ready to go, and it completely hurts you. So now when you go into a bye week, Alabama is going to throw in 2 weeks so many different things at you. You know what they're going to do? The number one thing, they're going to test exactly what A&M did to you 2 weeks before that. They're going to run. They're going to use motion. They're going to run zone read. They're going to get their backs out in space. It's going to be up to you to be able to identify, not go for the eye candy, and get ball carriers down to the ground, because if you cannot do that, then you're going to be in trouble. But as a whole, this is where I'm going to defend the defense. Even though they had struggles against A&M, and even though they could not adjust on the fly, this defense, for what it's worth, this LSU defense has been able to step up for you in so many different areas and so many different times. You know, I think about the second half versus South Carolina. I think about against Ole Miss. I think about what they did in the first half versus Arkansas. They have given you the ability to be able to stay in football games when offensively you can't do anything. When this was a game that when your defense was struggling late into a game that you needed to pick them up and you couldn't do it. You know, 8 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter and you're down 5, and then you throw an interception and basically the game gets sealed from there. I think that this is what Brian Kelly was talking about on Monday. We got to play complementary football, and we have to find consistency. When your defense or offense is struggling, when your offense is struggling, the defense, for what it's worth this season, has been able to pick you up. The offense was not able to pick the defense up last Saturday against A&M, and it's what ultimately hurt you in what you were doing. So when I look at this team, look, man, I'm not going to call out any specific player. I'm not going to say that this guy was bad, that guy was bad. But there's only one, like LSU for the last 3 years has had one thing in common when it comes to defense. Okay, you have had different defensive coordinators, different position coaches. The only common denominator when you're missing assignments and you're not able to figure out what it is that you needed to do, the only thing that is common is you. Now, you could blame, former DC Matt House, you can blame Blake Baker, you can blame Brian Kelly all you want to, but at some point as a man, as a player, you got to look in the mirror and say to yourself, "Hey, like, man, this is on me. How do we not know what we need to do?" Some of these guys are fourth and fifth year seniors. Some of these guys have been here for such a very long time. What do you mean that you don't know these things? So when I look at this defense, I have full confidence. I have complete and full confidence that LSU defensively with Blake Baker is going to respond. I think they are going to do some good things in this last 4-week stretch of November, and they're going to be fine. Just because they have one game where they're or one half really where they're unable to figure something out or stop something does not stop the fact that, hey, you had a really good performance against Arkansas. You had a really good performance against USC. You had a really good performance against Ole Miss that kept you in all of those games. I'm not out on them. But at some point, you're going to have to figure some things out, and you're going to have to figure it out quickly. I think the second thing here, too, and we spoke about this, and look, I am how do I want to say this? I am very I understand that a lot of people from an LSU side of things, when you look at the offense, we talk about the run game. The run game's got to get better, and you're right. I do think a lot of this has to do with scheme. I think a lot of it has to do with you're not figuring out what plays that you need to get into. You're not coming back to things that work. You're running a counter run and your running back's hitting the wrong hole. You're not finding the open lanes. You have some missed blocking assignments. You're getting guys like Tradez Green to be on the end line of scrimmage and block a guy who's going to be a top 5, top 10 overall pick, and Nick Scorton. Schematically, it's not favorable to what you need to do. In the preseason, I said this. I thought that you needed to go into the portal and get an experience back, a really talented experience back, and we did not do that. And I think it's hurt guys like Caleb Jackson, guys like Caden Durham. You can't allow and expect a true freshman to be everything that he needs to be for a run game. You can't allow that to happen. Now, Josh Williams is a good back. I love Josh, but he's not the guy that needs to be your every down back that's going to lead you to massive amounts of success. So when I look at this running game, I think that Brian Kelly, for what it's worth, Brian Kelly has got to take over what LSU's doing in the LSU run game. He's too experienced. He has the knowledge of what he needs to do. Whatever it is that they're doing, he needs to fix it. Now, he's said in his postgame after A&M, well, we've been working on this a lot. Well, you're dead last in the SEC in rushing. Dead last. Guys, Mississippi State, Vandy, Texas had 2 running backs that got hurt. They're still producing more of a running game than you are. You have not been able to produce a sound and stable run game for Garrett to take some pressure off of him. A lot of that's got to do with scheme, and you're going to have to find out a way to either, number one, find a way to run the football or extensions of the running game. Throw some quick patterns, throw some screens. He also said last week, meaning Brian Kelly, that, hey, we don't have the easy service throws for Garrett. That's why, when we look at him, he's going to be around 60, 65% completion percentage. Why aren't you giving him those easy throws on first down? If a defense is playing off coverage of you, why aren't you throwing a quick out? Why aren't you throwing a quick screen? Yards are it's even if you're getting 6 yards on small passes, okay, or on short passes on first down. 2nd and 6 is more manageable than 2nd and 10. And then you're trying to run the ball on 2nd and 10, and everybody knows that it's coming because everybody's figured out your game plan. Everybody's figured out what it is that you're doing. But here's the thing. I never thought going into the season that we would be halfway through the year and that LSU would be 16th in the SEC in rushing, dead last. Not once did I ever think that was humanly possible, that would be a thing. But nevertheless, here's where you stand. I do think Brian Kelly or Brad Davis or somebody is going to have to take over what you're doing there because it's not working. So I know a lot of us want to talk about when we look at Garrett and the struggles that he's had, well, it's all the running game. Well, that's not completely true. But the one big factor that he does not have, that you are not giving him, is an effective running game. It's just not happening. So I think that that's number two, and the thing that you got to fix this week in the bye week. I'd say that one of the biggest things too that we talked about is turnovers. Turnovers is something that when you look at it, you're averaging in the last month, you're averaging 3 turnover worthy plays or actual turnovers in the game, meaning you're missing field goals, or you got a turnover on downs, or you're throwing interceptions. Guys, you're averaging 3 of those at least per game in the last month. Even with games like South Alabama that's on the schedule, that you shouldn't even be having an issue with that. Guys, if you go into any football game, and I mean any football game ever, and you're averaging 3 of those a game, the simple nature that you have only lost 1 game in the last month is truly incredible. Now, I heard, and even our buddy Carter last night talked about this, but I heard, well, and that's even with the first-time starting quarterback. No. That has not – Garrett's status, or Garrett being a first-time QB, has absolutely nothing to do with you turning the ball over. There have been true freshman quarterbacks. You see one in Nebraska right now. You see one at Florida right now. I mean, this isn't a new thing of true freshman quarterbacks. I mean, you look at a couple of years ago when you had a guy like Jake Fromm that led Georgia to a national title run. He wasn't turning the ball over, and then he did in a national title game, and they lost. So the big thing that LSU offensively, or just as a team, like the number one thing that you got to focus on during these next 2 weeks, you got to put it in the brain of Garrett. He's got to limit these turnovers, these field goals. Are you going for them on 4th down? Are you punting and playing field position? If you can't kick a field goal outside of 45 yards, you got to punt it, or you got to go for it. Because every time that you're missing a field goal and you're not playing field position, or things are going wrong, that's a recipe for disaster. Guys, think about this. Everybody wants to talk about A&M beating you 38-23, and if you're box score watching, yeah, it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. Oh man, A&M completely took it to LSU. That's not true, because you're down 5 with 8 minutes left to go. But then you turn the football over and you have no chance of coming back after that. The problem has been, and will continue to be, that if you do not limit these situations, if you don't limit, like, hey, a team in A&M is starting on the 45 or the 40-yard line. Like, those things just cannot happen. When you look at A&M, they started a drive at the 19, they started a drive at the 8, they started a drive at the 40-yard line, and then, the 37 or 40-yard line, whatever it was. Those things just cannot happen. You're giving up too much field position. Marcel Reed comes in. Why don't you try to make him go 80, 90 yards to beat you? Why aren't you doing that? And I think that we got overwhelmed. I think we got overwhelmed as a team. We got overwhelmed as a coaching staff. But the number one thing is that we have been in a situation, an issue, that when we are turning the football over, as much as we're turning the ball over, that has been and will continue to be the massive issue that this LSU team struggle with. I don't know how you limit it. I think that that's, in some instances, who you are. I think that it's built into your DNA as an offense right now. And I don't know if there's a solution. I don't know if there's a way for you to remedy that, but you got to build it inside. You got to build it into your quarterback and beat it into his head that, listen, sometimes you got to get the tough yardage. Sometimes you got to take the sack, and we got to punt the football away. You continuing to average 3 times per game, missed field goals, turnover on downs, or interceptions. As you got 7 interceptions in 4 games. You should have had more. You should have had probably 9 or 10. It's not going to win you football games. It's not where you're going to be. You look in these big game situations. I mean, Garrett throws 2 interceptions against South Carolina. One of them got called back. The other was a pick 6 that would have lost you the football game if that indeed wasn't called back. You have 2 interceptions against South Alabama. You had 3 interceptions against A&M. You have 2 interceptions against Ole Miss. Guys, that's not going to win you any football games. And when I talked about at number 1, the defense stepping up for you and taking over for you in certain situations, the overall play for them, all the statistical stuff gets thrown out because they're having to come into a tough situation and get you stops, which they've been able to do. Okay, so one game they're not able to do that, or a second half they're not able to do that. Well, you got to be able to pick them up and not turn the ball over. And I think that, I've been thinking about this for a couple of days. Where would you be as a team? Like, where would you be as a program? Where would you be as a team if your defense is not put in those situations? If you were limiting those turnovers, where would you be? Like against South Alabama in the second half, it doesn't really matter. Okay, that's fine. But it's starting to matter now when you're playing teams like Ole Miss, when you're playing teams like A&M. It's going to matter when you play a team like Alabama. It's 100% going to matter. Now, you keep teams around with you like A&M. If you do that at Florida, if you do that against Vanderbilt, who's a really scrappy football team, if you do that against Oklahoma, that's how teams stay around. And when we look at a guy like Garrett, everybody wants to, at least this entire fan base wants to be like, oh, you don't like him. You don't think he's any good. That's guys, that's neither here nor there anymore. See, that neither here nor there. The problem has been and will continue to be offensively. You continue to turn the football over, which is getting you beat. And if you don't stop doing that and you don't stop doing that now, then, guys, you're going to lose one of these next 4 football games. And which leads me to this. And I want to make this pretty obvious before we start wrapping this up and get out of here. Guys, you're not out of this playoff picture or this playoff race. There's a strong possibility, there's a strong chance that you were able to go through this month of November and win out. As the old saying goes, October is for pretenders, November is for contenders. Well, with an expanded playoff, guys, you can be a contender. Now, I don't know if you're a national title contender. I don't know if you can get there. I don't know if you are on that level at the current moment, but here's what I do know. We talked about over the last month, and we have talked about this ad nauseum in the sense of that this stretch against Arkansas, A&M, and Ole Miss was by far, in my opinion, the toughest stretch that you had the entire season. And it is. Now you go into a more favorable situation against Alabama at home. You do have Florida on the road, but who is the Florida Gators? You have Vandy at home. You have Oklahoma at home. You're in the next 3 of the next 4 football games, you are going to be in Baton Rouge, and you got to take advantage of that. So can you go on a 4-game run? Because if you do, you are in the playoffs. I don't want to be in a Cheez-It Bowl. I don't want to be in the ReliaQuest Bowl. I don't want to be in the Pop-Tart Bowl or the Duke's Mayo Bowl. I'm over that. Who are you as a program? And you're going to find out, how does, number 1, this team respond? Number 2, how does this team find ways to be more tough? How do they find ways to be able to extend drives and do things that they need to do? So you are still a contender. You still can make it to where your ultimate goal would be. Now, if I told you in the beginning of the season, like, hey, man, at the end of the year, you're going to be in the playoff, you would probably do that. And you would probably want that to happen. So when I look at this team, look, you are still in the race. You are still in the hunt. You just have no more slip-ups. So I appreciate our friends over at Service Hawk Digital. We are here. We are going to be here every week. This is a fantastic studio. Look, I got Little Wayne behind me. I ain't gonna lie, that picture's pretty good. I might need to grab that. So I appreciate our good friends over at Service Hawk Digital. Y'all need to get over here today. If you're a business owner, you're trying to grow your business, Service Hawk Digital, servicehawk.io. I mean, look, man, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow, and that's why we're here. We'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. Peace out.